Hi folks, I'm Joseph D'Ambrosia from LaserMax. In this video we're going to talk about the installation of the LaserMax integrated light and integrated laser grip housings for the Beretta Pico. The first step for the installation is to take your Pico and make sure you're exhibiting firearm safety rules at all times by keeping it pointed in a safe direction and keeping your finger off the trigger. You're going to verify the weapon's unloaded by stripping the magazine and then locking your slide to the rear while visually and physically inspecting that the weapon is unloaded. Also ensure that there's no ammunition around you at the time while you're manipulating the weapon. When you've verified you're clear, go ahead and send the slide forward and take your factory supplied magazine. This is a unique feature for the Beretta Pico design here. While most folks may use a coin or a screwdriver, Beretta has designed this so you can use your factory supplied magazine to assist you in the takedown. On the right side of the firearm, you're going to see a pin with a slot in it. This is your disassembly pin. Take the base plate of your magazine and rest that in the slot on your disassembly pin. Rotate counterclockwise approximately a quarter turn, and you'll notice that the slide is kicked forward. From here, grab the slide and strip it from the lower grip housing. And you can set that slide aside. On the lower grip housing, you're going to go back to that disassembly pin. Right now, there's a flat portion that's facing up. You're going to take your tool and you're going to rotate that disassembly pin until the round portion of it is facing up. There's a round side and a flat side. The round portion needs to be facing up now, and you're going to push with the corner of your magazine base plate from left to right on the frame to remove the disassembly pin. Push till it comes out and then give it an extra pull on the other side, and you can set that pin aside. If you look at it, you'll see the flat portion and the round portion. Okay, there's two separate sides to that pin. From here, you're going to grip the frame firm in your hands, and you're going to grab the rails of the internal chassis. Make sure you pull upward. You may have to pull on both the front and rear sides to get the chassis system out of the firearm. You can go ahead and set your factory supplied grip housing aside. On the internal chassis system, we have a couple points of features you need to make sure you're paying attention to. Generally, this will not come apart when you pull it out of the weapon, but there are a handful of small parts you need to pay attention to. On the trigger, for example, there is a pin here on the trigger that could potentially fall out if you're not careful. We recommend you pinch your fingers around the trigger cover and that pin just to ensure it stays in place. Your trigger bar here that I just pulled down, when I pull it down, it's now out of battery with the hammer. If I were to pull the trigger now, you see that bar moving, but the hammer is not cocking. If this happens when you disassemble the chassis, all you need to do is give the hammer a slight cock. It'll put it back into position. I press the trigger, and you can now see that trigger move, the hammer move. On the front portion here, you'll see two small springs for the trigger right underneath the bottom if you look through. If one of these springs were to be off place, for example, to get that back into place, if you can reach your finger inside and push the spring down, and underneath the small catch on the bottom, do so. If your finger's too big to get in there, just take a dental pick or another similar tool to push that spring down and back into place. These things don't happen often, but they are small considerations when you have the chassis out of the grip housing. You can set your chassis down gently, making sure you're paying attention to those parts. Take your LaserMax supplied grip housing now, and you're going to grab your chassis. Again, before you drop this in, inspect those parts that we talked about. The trigger's held in place. The trigger bar is in place, and I have my springs in the proper location. You're going to drop the trigger into the trigger slot of the LaserMax grip housing. Drop the trigger in, and now press forward slightly on the chassis and drop the chassis in from rear to front. When it's firmly seated into the grip housing, go back to that disassembly pin we talked about. And you're going to insert this pin now from the right to the left with the round portion of this pin facing upward. Place that inside, run all the way through, and give it a firm press. And from here, you're going to take your magazine base plate and rotate that pin again so that now the flat portion is facing upwards. From here, take your slide assembly, and you're going to align the rails of the chassis system into their respective slots on the slide assembly, and go ahead and charge the weapon. You've now successfully installed the LaserMax grip housing into the Beretta Pico. To verify proper installation, we do recommend Again, after safely clearing visually and physically your firearm, send the slide forward and dry fire this weapon 2 to 3 times to make sure that the chassis system parts are all installed properly. And that's all that's required for installation of the LaserMax integrated laser grip housing for the Beretta Pico.